Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21 Hats podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Feldman. This week, special guest Rich Jordan takes us inside a marketing challenge presented by his successful acquisition of home services businesses. Do you keep the legacy names of those businesses to preserve local trust at the cost of running a fragmented, inefficient marketing operation? Do you take the strongest brand you own and roll it out everywhere, even if it may not translate from one community to the next? Or do you wipe the slate clean and create an entirely new brand to unify the whole operation, knowing that it means walking away from money you've already sunk into branding your biggest location? In a conversation with Shawn, Busse, and Jay Goltz, Rich walks us through how he wrestled with those choices, why he ultimately made the call he did, and what he learned along the way. His takeaways included that there are still people who listen to radio, that an authentic story can compete with private equity, and that it is possible to find a marketing agency that will align its interests with yours. Even in good times, owning and running a business can be a lonely pursuit. Our hope is that these weekly conversations will let owners know they are not alone in facing challenges. In fact, that's the whole idea behind the 21 Hats community, engaging with other owners to get the kinds of insight only another owner can offer. If you're interested in learning more, you can sign up for the Morning Report newsletter, which offers examples every day of owners solving problems and seizing opportunities. Just search 21 Hats Morning Report to subscribe. Joining me this week on the podcast are Shawn Busse, CEO of Kinesis, which is based in Portland, Oregon, and works with small businesses on marketing, culture, and strategy. Jay Goltz, CEO of the Goltz Group, whose companies in Chicago include a picture frame business, artist frame service, and a home furnishing store, Jason Home. And Rich Jordan, who is CEO of a home services business with offices in New Jersey and New Hampshire. It's called, well, you'll have to listen to the podcast to find out what it's called. That's kind of the whole point. The episode is titled, 3 Branches, 3 Brands, Anatomy of a Rebrand. Welcome, Shawn, Jay, and welcome back, Rich, our special guest today. Rich, we had you on last year, a little bit more than a year ago, I think, to talk about your experiences leaving the Marines and jumping into the ownership of a plumbing business. Can you start by kind of bringing us up to date? What's happened in the past year that got you thinking about rebranding?
Yeah, sure. I think a couple things. We sort of in the year leading up to our interview last year, we had really started to lean into branded activity, like branded marketing. Think like mass media, radio, TV, streaming, stuff like that, like really getting our brand and message out in front of the world. We really started leaning into that at one of my branches in New Hampshire for the year leading up to the interview and in the year since. And we saw a lot of just improvement and growth off of that. You know, it was kind of an experiment at first, a little bit of a leap of faith.
What did you learn? What worked?
For us, radio. Radio has worked excellently for us, which I think anytime I tell people that, especially people my age, they're, incredulous at that because a lot of them don't listen to radio. They'd rather listen to Spotify or Apple Podcasts or something. But the reality is, like, a lot of the world listens to radio, and we've just had tremendous growth off of our brand off of radio.
Has that growth included younger people, or are you getting an older customer that way?
I would say really like your typical like homeowner demographic, late 20s through 60s. So that was kind of the first part, is that we really started to build confidence around, okay, like we know how to build a brand now. That's something we didn't understand before, and now we feel pretty confident in our ability to do that. And then the sort of straw that broke the camel's back was this past summer. So about 6 months ago, I purchased a small plumbing company. And this led to us having our 3rd location and also our 3rd brand, because all of my branches were separate brands that had been acquired at some point or another.
Wait, give us an overview. So you've got plumbing, electrical, right?
That's right. And HVAC.
Okay.
Rich, one of the kind of mumblings I've been hearing lately in your space, and I don't really operate in B2C, but I am kind of interested in it, is I'm hearing more and more of kind of like questioning of the digital only approach. And so you're kind of one of the first people I've heard say, yeah, actually, we went on a different path. In a lot of ways, it's kind of an old path, right? Which is mass media, broad-based brand approach. What motivated you to explore the new thing? Was it that things were declining in efficacy or costs were increasing or you just needed more market share?
Yeah, it's a little bit of all of that. I mean, for one, it's just digital, and as more and more contractors become familiar with digital or engage digital advertising agencies, it's a bid process. It's an auction, and those leads just get more and more expensive every year. And I think part of the problem too is finding customers in that way is so transactional. Most people call it, direct response advertising. I sometimes call it transactional advertising, transactional marketing.
Yeah.
I'm feeding dollars into Google. They're giving me leads back, and you don't really know me from Adam as the customer. And I'm going to send a technician out to your house. I was the one who picked up the phone. I'm the one who got a guy out to you fast. And there's no kind of branding or you don't know me, you don't like me, you don't trust me. I just happen to be the top ad on Google.
In Chicago, there's two companies that are on TV constantly doing exactly what you're doing, and they've got their name out there. So you'd have no reason to go to your computer to look it up because you know this company. So I think it's a way of butting in front of the line and getting them to call you first before they even go do a search. And I have the same thing in my business.
I think it's huge.
This is really interesting, Rich, because, for a while, that digital ecosystem pulled kind of an interesting move, which is to call it performance marketing. I don't know if you've ever heard that title, and so it's this idea that the other types of marketing aren't performing, which I find kind of funny. But can you quantify for us, in terms of that transactional marketing space, maybe what you were paying for a customer 2 years ago versus today, or 3 years ago versus today?
So that would be 4 years ago. I'd say the sort of napkin math at the time was you were kind of expecting to spend $100 per customer, which was pretty easy to stomach. Now, I mean that, and especially when you start factoring in, kind of your conversion rate on these clicks, after, the customer clicks on your ad and then they may or may not call you. If they call you, what's your booking rate on that call? If they book with you, what's the cancellation rate after the booking? And then ultimately, do you get a tech to that house? So after you get through that whole conversion funnel, a lot of times it's $400 per customer right now.
Wow. And it was 100 when you first started.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was going to guess 200, but that's a lot.
I mean, so especially, and you're running, let's say you're running a garbage disposal repair. I mean, a customer's only going to see that $200 and maybe $250 in value in a job like that. And it's hard to charge that.
Rich, do you also track what percentage of these customers end up being long-term customers as opposed to a one-time purchase?
So they certainly skew more towards one-time. I'd say we do a fairly decent job once we kind of get in front of the customer, put a technician in the home, customers are fairly happy with us and we tend to retain them. Or at least that's what we convince ourselves is true. But certainly the customer who's just clicking on a sponsored ad is a little bit more difficult to retain. They're certainly more difficult to convert, right? The customer who might be using me for the first time, but is familiar with me through, branded mass media activity, they're much more likely to not balk at the price. They already feel like they know us. They called us out because they wanted us to do the work, and they're going to convert. So I think where you really see it is not necessarily on repeat and retention, but it's definitely on conversion. We definitely see a difference in conversion.
All right. So you had the straw breaking the camel's back, 3 brands and 3 locations. What happens next?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've always been envious of larger single brand companies, right? Trying to run multiple brands is difficult. And frankly, I did all that big push and focus and experiment on the branding for my New Hampshire branch. And as far as branding goes, I completely neglected my other branch, just focused on New Hampshire. And we had success. And we just did, we just kept doing the transactional marketing, digital marketing for the other branch. And then as we saw success with the branding in New Hampshire, naturally we want to do it everywhere else. But to do it for 2 or now 3 brands just felt like a very tall task, especially for a small team where I'm essentially the marketing manager and CMO, right?
Well, it's inefficient in that you can put one ad out and cover all 3 brands versus having to advertise 3 different ways to 3 different customers. All of the customers that need plumbing ultimately need an electrician, ultimately need heating, air conditioning. So that's one thing for sure. These homeowners need all 3 of those things.
Exactly. Well, that, and then also something as simple as, the production cost of a radio or a TV spot. If it's different brands, you got to run 3 different productions. That's expensive. And that's not even talking about just like creative bandwidth and like your ability to have good ideas around marketing and branding, while you're taking a shower. If you're trying to do it for 3 of them, it's just difficult to do. And if you have one brand that you're just constantly thinking about, I think you're generally going to have better results.
Tell us about the culture side of this, Rich. So I'm kind of curious, what tensions you were trying to solve there, if you thought about that from that perspective, or maybe tensions that got introduced through this process of changing the brands?
Brand and culture, I think, are like closely intertwined. Especially if you're like doing a good job on the brand and on like, what I might call like internal marketing amongst the team. Like what are your team's core behaviors? What does this brand stand for? What do we believe and what are our standards? Again, it's not impossible. And we did do it, but it's harder to do it across 3 different brands. Like at Sanford, our New Hampshire branch is very robust. Like we have core behaviors that we live and speak every day. You'll randomly overhear guys saying them to each other, in the warehouse. It was just a little bit harder for us to drive that at the other branches, things like that. Shared mantras and shared beliefs.
I would think that one of the problems is, just thinking out loud here, if you have a plumbing problem, it's pretty much an emergency probably. Whereas if you have an electrical problem, it might be able to wait a week or 2 or 3 or 5 because it's probably your house is going to burn down. Maybe you need another outlet somewhere. So there's probably a little bit of a culture problem in that plumbers need to be more on the spot because if the toilet's backed up or if the sink's not working, it's a real problem. Or heating and air conditioning. Your heating goes out in the winter, it's an emergency. So I would think there's a little bit difference in just the reaction time needed for each one of those businesses. True?
That is true. It's probably worth clarifying, though, that like each of our branches is multi-trade. Like it's not 3 branches that all have separate trades across the 3 trades. It's not. I don't have like an electrical branch and an HVAC branch.
When you bought it, that's how you bought it? They had the 3 things together?
No, generally we've bought them as individual. Either plumbing or HVAC.
Right, that's what I was talking about. I was talking about in merging those together. I would have thought there's a little bit of a difference in mentality of how much of an emergency is this versus you can wait till tomorrow.
Yeah, no, there definitely is. Plumbing, what I find is that when customers call for plumbing, they're really expecting you to get out to them either today or tomorrow. Electrical, for the most part, is sort of like vanity projects or like home upgrades. It's like lighting, ceiling fans, outlets, things like that. And then occasionally you'll get like a no power call for electrical, but those are actually pretty rare. Electrical systems are pretty robust and pretty reliable, it turns out. And then HVAC can often be an emergency, but I'd say is typically skews a little less urgent than plumbing.
So, Rich, you've kind of described why you started thinking about wanting to have one brand everywhere. There's an obvious cost to that, I assume, that some of these brands may have been fairly well known and entrenched in their locations, and you would be walking away from that to some extent. How much was that a part of your thinking?
Yeah, I would say that was a big part of our thinking. So part of the context is that the real brand equity that we have, 3 brands, we are largely responsible for. Like we built them into what they are, right? Like we bought them as small companies that were largely not well known in their own markets. And like we built them into what they are, especially in New Hampshire, where we had been doing the 2 years of branded activity. We had really grown that business. I mean, that branch is twice the size of of my next largest branch at this point.
Do you know how much money you spent on marketing and branding there?
You trying to make me cry on this interview? Close to $1 million on branding for that branch.
Over how long a period?
Over about 2 years.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. This seemed like the natural move was to take the name of that large branch that we had built and branded, and just use that name across the other 2 branches. And the name of that branch is Sanford. It's named after it's the last name of the founder, and that was the plan. That's what we're going to do, and the whole company was aware of that, and we were getting ready to execute that. As we got closer to finally pulling the trigger, I just started feeling this like friction of like, man, like how are we going to, like, what's the story that we're going to tell in these other 2 markets? I take Guarantee Plumbing in New Jersey, named after Tom Guerin, the founder. I take CNF Plumbing, named after the 2 founders of that business. And then I rename it to another founder, different market that no one knows. And it's not my name. What's the story?
Wait, what about trademark issues? That's a fairly common name. Did you do a thorough trademark thing? Are there other Sanford companies out there that could go after you if you would have changed your name to that?
There are none that are sophisticated enough to have trademarks on their name. So, but really the real friction was what's the story we're going to tell? Well, we have a sister company and, up in New Hampshire, and they're bigger and they kind of have their shit together. So we decided we're going to change our name to them. It's really hard to do that and make it not look like some sort of corporate takeover. It's not really something that anyone can get excited about. Kind of feels like a loss for the other 2 branches, in my opinion. Like they didn't make the cut. So we ended up pivoting away from that.
How far along did you get before you pivoted away from it?
I guess we maybe got to the starting line of a rebrand, and then that's when we sort of pivoted away.
You know what? I think you have very good instincts, because I got to tell you, as someone who's used the same heating, air conditioning people for years, when they changed their name, I did get some anxiety of, oh, here we go. Roll up, raising prices, get rid of my guy that we liked for the last 20 years. There is an anxiety level piece to this that I think you were smart to think about, because it's true.
Yeah, and I think even no matter what you change your name to, you're still up against that. But if you can meet that objection or that anxiety with a good feel good story, you can overcome it. But the potential story that I just laid out, I think falls flat.
At what point, Rich? I'm kind of curious where your brand agency played a role here or didn't play a role. Were they effectively taking orders from you, where you're saying we need to rebrand and we want to rebrand under Sanford, and they're like, yes, sir, let's do it? Or did they push back and say, hey, there's an opportunity here, let's examine it? Or did you drive that?
Yeah, I'm fortunate that I've got really incredible brand agency partners. So yeah, us getting to the starting line with them was under the pretense that we were going to rebrand everything to Sanford, and how are we going to do this?
I assume they had done the work for you on Sanford, the $1 million that you spent building that brand?
No, I did that all by myself.
Oh, interesting.
Probably way too inefficiently. and after having done that, brought them on to help me tackle what I wanted to do with bringing everything under one banner.
But to Shawn's, which he has an interesting point, I didn't realize you had a branding agency. Was it all your instinct that said, wait, I think I'm making a mistake? Or did they flush that out for you? That's what they do. That's what they're supposed to do. Did they raise any flags while you were doing this to say, listen, you ought to think twice about this? Or otherwise, what the hell do they do?
We brought them on, and yeah, the initial marching order was hey, we're rebranding everything to Sanford. Let's figure out how to do this. And then we kind of got in a room, and then that's when we really started to think hard about this and just kind of reassess our approach. And yeah, certainly they drove kind of the initiation of that.
Okay. Good for them.
And yeah, very thankful for, because I think it would have been a mistake.
Yeah, it's really props to both them and you, because it is risky for an agency to push back on a client in that regard. because you just said it costs us $1 million, right? Like that's the like hard costs, right? There's the cultural costs, there's the risks, there's tons of other things. It's so easy for an agency to say, yeah, we'll make you a nice new pretty logo with the name Stanford on it. No problem. And that says a lot, I think, about your relationship and that idea of being partners as opposed to order takers.
Yeah, and we've had some marketing agencies in the past. Like we had a local agency that did, I joked and said that I did all that spend on my own under the Stanford name, but we did have like a agency helping us with the media buys and things previously. And they were a little bit closer to what you're saying, Shawn. They were a little bit more of, for better or worse, like, they'd let me walk off the end of the cliff as long as I had a smile on my face while I did it,
Yeah.
And you paid the check before you got over the cliff, yeah. So as the entrepreneur, I have to ask, did those people make their money from the 15% agency fee on the buys, or did you pay them in addition to that, or how did that all work?
The original agency?
The one that you said, you had that was placing the ads and stuff.
Yeah, they were your classic advertising agency. They got a monthly retainer plus, 15% agency fee on all the media buys.
Yeah, that's a really good question Jay has, right? Because I think a lot of listeners probably don't know the difference between these different types of agencies. An ad agency that makes a commission off of media buys, they generally don't want to push you in the brand direction, because it's risky to the relationship. It isn't something that they're making a percentage on usually. They just want to keep the ad machine going. Versus, it sounds like the newer agency is much more of a strategic partner. Is that fair? And they probably charged you for the branding process, not just a percent of the advertising, right?
Yeah. The agency I'm with now is unique. Just on the typical agency model. I think you're right. Obviously, I guess the agency does stand to benefit from, like, if your business does grow, you're probably going to increase your media buy, and they'll get a larger cut of that. But I think it's a marginal benefit. Simply
because you're smaller, you're not Coca-Cola. I mean, if you were a gigantic company, 15% would be $1 zillion, but a smaller company just doesn't, even spending $1 million over 2 years, that's not big money. I mean, it's right. 15%. That's not going to make anybody rich.
Yeah, exactly. So I think they're happy to have you and their other, 36 clients, and everyone's just spending and happy and retained. I think client retention is top of mind for them. My new agency has a different model. They actually don't take any agency fee. So I basically get that agency fee back from my media buys. So my media buys are 15% cheaper than they would have otherwise been. They don't mark up any of the production costs. So any of the radio spot production, any of the branding, website design, graphic design, all that stuff, another agency would be putting some sort of markup on that. They don't. And then they just take a percent of last year's revenue.
Wow.
And then as my company grows, their fee grows.
Wow.
When you first hear that, it can be kind of hard to stomach. You're like, oh man, what? But then you start to do the math on how much your advertising agency, your tip on the traditional model, is taking. And if you're spending real dollars on branding and media buys, let's say you're spending 6% of revenue on media buys, and they're taking 15% of that. That's about 1% of revenue.
Yeah.
And that's before all the production costs that are probably above and beyond that 6%, ultimately getting 1%, 2%. They might be getting 40% of your ultimate advertising spend.
I got to tell you, it doesn't sound bad to me. It sounds like it's an honest approach. They're not pushing you into doing particular ads to get to 15. It's not like they're making the ads. They're getting 15% of something that they really have nothing to do with. This seems like a more honest approach to the whole thing. I mean, nothing's perfect. It's not like you're selling, peanuts by the pound, but it kind of makes sense to me.
Shawn, how common is that arrangement?
It's super uncommon, and it's pretty cool, because one of the reasons I left the ad agency I worked at 25 years ago is because they were the typical model. And I kept pushing them. I was like, hey, we need to charge clients for things like brand work, or at the time, this crazy idea of building website. And they were like, no, Shawn, shut up. Just make more ads. And because they made their money on the number of ads that were run, that was always the answer. It was always more ads. Whether that helped the company grow or not, And that's been my complaint about an ad percent model forever. And it's pretty cool because now you're aligned on the incentives, right? It's like Rich wants to grow. This company benefits by Rich growing. They're going to put things on the table that they think are going to help him grow, not necessarily just what's to their benefit.
Yeah, and I think in a traditional advertising model, you could, let's say you've got some advertising channels that are very cost effective and really like achieving the goals you want. You tell your advertising agency to kill some other channels, focus on this. We're going to reduce our ad spend to 2% of revenue, and we're really happy about this as a client. This is great. The advertising agency is going to be pissed.
Yeah, totally.
You're taking their money.
Right.
An agency on this model is happy for you. We're both growing together and we're doing it cost effectively. That's great.
And as a quote unquote partner, and if you have an off year, okay, they're making less, you're making less. They're actually in the game with you. I mean, not bad. And if you have a tremendous year, you can afford to pay them more because you had a tremendous year. So I give them credit for coming up with that. I'm surprised.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I don't have a ton of visibility into like the advertising space, but they're the only firm that I've come across with a model like that.
So, Rich, you start talking about putting one brand on all the branches and not a brand that already exists. How long did it take you to get over the $1 million you'd spent on the one brand you built?
It still keeps me up at night.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten over it yet.
You know what? It wasn't all lost. You did get those customers out of it, and you're going to retain those customers. So it's not like you threw the money away. So sleep better. It wasn't a catastrophic loss. You still have those customers.
Yeah, and I think like there's a risk to changing the name, but in my estimation, like it is all execution risk. It's all execution risk. Generally, like I'm happy to take on execution risk. So yeah, I mean, we spent the money, we invested, we built a Sanford brand. I think we got ourselves pretty close to like household name status in the market we're in. And there's no reason that we can't transfer that goodwill to a new name if we execute it properly.
Okay, I'm dying to hear the punchline here. So,
how did you go about figuring out the new name?
So, we talked about culture earlier, and shared mantras and how important this is to us. So we have 10 core behaviors at Sanford and across the other branches as well, but certainly like most embraced at Sanford. And one of them, which funny enough was voted the team's top core behavior, is seize the high ground, do the right thing even when not easy or profitable. And, seize the high ground is a little bit of a throwback to my military background and has a little bit of that flavor to it. But of the 10 core behaviors, I feel like we lean into that one more than any other one. Of course, we're dealing with dozens of customers every day. Things go awry occasionally. We have to go back out, fix stuff, do stuff for free, refund money. Like where another contractor might argue with you and try to nickel and dime and split hairs, like we really lean into that seize the high ground.
It always surprises me that companies don't do that you don't lose money once in a while. So good for you. I'm sure that's a major reason why you're successful.
I think so. I think I think that that core behavior and a few other things that go behind it operationally, I think is a huge part of our growth story and our satisfied customer base. And in many ways, it's one of those things that like you want to try to be able to say things that your competition is not willing to say, right? And for us, like one of those things has been we offer a lifetime workmanship guarantee. Anything we touch, it's like done right or we're going to make it right. And like we totally stand behind that.
Whose lifetime, the customers or yours?
Well, yeah, I play pretty fast and loose, Jay, so I don't know if we want to do it on my lifetime. So like, that's very much tied into the seize the high ground core behavior and certainly something we lean into every day. That all said, now that I've given a quite lengthy prelude here, our new name is High Ground Service Pros. And it's been really cool. Like I did the reveal of that name to the team about a month ago. Just seeing like sort of like the buy-in from the team around that, the fact that they had been like taking that core behavior so seriously, living that, and then now seeing it on the side of the truck, it was very cool Because, I was worried not just about our customers, but I was also worried about the team and if they're gonna like it, if they're gonna buy into it. And the response was resoundingly positive.
You've really tapped into something that I believe my 116 employees buy into, which is they feel good knowing we're taking care of customers. Like, I feel great that I took what my grandfather taught my father, who taught me, who I taught them. I feel great about the fact that my employees get it, that they want to take care of customers, and they've been trained to take care of customers, and they're proud of that. And I think that's what you've done. And I can see where they would be proud of that name because they get it.
I think one of the toughest things as a technician, if you're working for the wrong company that, doesn't lean into that, is, you're standing in a basement with a homeowner with a broken furnace and, it might have been our fault or maybe we installed it improperly. And then you got to tell that customer that it's going to be another $1,500 to fix it.
Rich, how did that name emerge? Did you have a whole long list of names that you considered? Did you test names? What happened?
It was kind of cool how it happened, actually. So we decided we were going to entertain this idea that we would change the name. And my branding agency came out on site for a full day, and it was the the creative ad writer, like the copywriter, like sort of more of the sales and operations focused partner of the two. So they came out, spent the day with us from like 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. interviewing me, some of my key leaders, the rest of the team, went out to dinner, really just immersed for a day. And then they left. And we stayed in like loose touch for a few weeks. And really it was that creative just kind of like stewing on what he saw while he was here. And then he, classic kind of marketing, advertising, pitched me on a few names. And actually, I went into that meeting and I was like, I hope these names suck. I hope he just brings me some names that I can just shoot down. I was like, because if we can stick with the Sanford name, that's going to save me like $300,000 on the rebrand. And one of the ones that he put in front of me was High Ground, and it basically just like knocked me over.
You had me at hello.
Yeah, I think verbatim, my response was, "You son of a bitch! I can't."
That's awesome. So cool.
And no testing, I assumed. You just went with it.
No, we did. Yep, we just full send. Yep.
What about the legal side of it? Trademark research, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So we early on, we did some trademark research. They came up clean. We also got the funny enough, highground.com was available.
Wow. Are you kidding me?
That's remarkable.
That is incredible.
Yeah, that's a message from God looking out for you.
Yeah, my expectation was that we'd have to do something, call High Ground, choose High Ground, seize highground.com.
I would think High Ground service would have been available, but not just the word High Ground, though. That's the remarkable part.
Yeah, really happy with that, with how that went down. So now we own highground.com. That website's just recently been built out.
So what are you doing about the formerly known as Prince? I mean, what are you doing? Are you putting formerly known as what? How are you doing that transition?
Yeah, so I'm kind of I'm leaning into my previous experience with some of the acquisitions we've done. We have in the past acquired other local businesses and rolled them into, say, Sanford, for instance, in New Hampshire. And some of those businesses were well recognized, despite being small. Like, they were well recognized and well branded, and they had been doing radio and TV. And so there was a little bit of risk in those brand transitions back then. And the way we handled them was to basically quick absorption into, the Sanford brand. As far as like operationally, trucks rewrapped, technicians in new uniforms, and like full absorption. For the cultural benefits and for the operational benefits. So the company that we had the success with on this, the company's name was Bill Trombley Plumbing and Heating. So, if you're a longtime customer of Bill Trombley, or if you're someone who is familiar with Bill Trombley and wants to use them for the first time, you're probably going to type Bill Trombley into Google. Probably. So I want to make sure that when you do that, you're not met with nothing. So we left the website up. We left the Google business profiles up. And then on the website, like on the marquee of the website, there's a photo of me and Bill shaking hands and, a little bit of an introduction to the partnership. And then for the first 6 months, we can track what phone number you called to get to us. So if you called us from a Bill Trombley phone number, we would answer the phone as, "Thanks for calling Bill Trombley. How may I help you?" Go through the entire booking flow, book the call, and then on the end say, "Hey, by the way, we're really excited to announce we recently partnered with another local business, Sanford, so that we can get a technician out to your home quicker. It may be a Sanford or a Bill Trombley truck coming out to your home. Is that okay with you?" "Oh yeah, no problem. That sounds good." "All right, great." And that's what we did. And then we slowly kind of tapered off and just started answering the phone at Sanford over the course of a year. That worked great. And that's basically exactly what we're planning to do here.
Where do things stand? How far along in the process are you?
So we did the internal reveals, just about a month ago, and then started really working towards the public launch. We started introducing the rebrand publicly on social media about 10 days ago, roughly 2 weeks ago. And then just yesterday, we did like a full public launch. So right now there's like billboards up, radio spots live. We did a full email blast to the customer list announcing the rebrand. And so we're basically 36 hours into this rebrand at this point, into the public launch.
Rich, can you tell us what this whole thing is going to cost you?
It's, every rock I turn over is another couple $1,000. But it looks like it's going to be about $500,000 to get the whole thing done.
Wow. So less than you spent on Sanford.
Right. Yeah.
But that can be amortized over. It's not like it's a one shot. You're going to have to benefit from this for the next 10 years.
Rich, I'm curious about one other aspect of this. Can you estimate, do you know to what extent you are competing with private equity-backed businesses in your various markets?
Yeah, it varies by market. So like, for instance, the branch where I first got started, which is like coastal New Jersey, like the Jersey Shore, that is, it's a red ocean down there with PE. Like almost pretty much any company. I can't really think of a single company down there that is my size or larger at this point that is not owned by private equity. It was only companies that are smaller than us that are independent.
Which means in about 2 or 3 years, you're going to get some people giving you some serious offers, which you probably thought of this. By doing this, you're going to get back those advertising dollars 100 times because your company's going to be so much more valuable being branded as one big.
If he sells it. But hopefully he won't sell it to private equity.
No, my point is, given that I'm 69, I now understand something I never used to think of. You can't do this forever. So one day, someone's going to pay you a fortune for having all these branded things together.
Yeah, one day after we've achieved all of our aims and all that, maybe we'll think about it.
But I wonder about another aspect of this, Rich, which is I hear that there's some backlash against private equity-owned businesses, that customers don't necessarily love big companies coming in from outside of town and buying up their local favorites. Are you at all concerned, and through this process, were you at all concerned that by adopting this larger brand, putting it on all of your locations and, in some ways doing things that look like you're professionalizing your whole operation, not that it wasn't professional before, but are you at all concerned that you're giving off a PE vibe that some customers might think you've been bought by somebody and that they're not going to get the care that they got before?
It's interesting because we had, like at Sanford, for instance, we had really professionalized that company, even under the Sanford name. And the trucks, they had the Sanford name on them, but they looked good. They looked good. They looked clean. The techs were in nice uniforms. So like I think you could have confused us for private equity then as well, which often happens, a private equity company that's masquerading as like a family owned company because it's got the founder's name on it. And I think part of the friction that I felt, of course, I'm not private equity, but I am someone who acquired the business, right? I have equity in the business and it is private. And there was a little bit of friction for me for a few years, and I ultimately got over it, but there was definitely friction where I felt like I had to hide behind the brand. Because like my last name's not Sanford. And like, why does this guy own the company? Who is this guy?
What do you mean by hiding behind the brand? Does you mean you didn't want to put your face forward?
Yeah, like I was hesitant to tell people that I was the owner, that my name's Rich Jordan and I'm the owner of the company.
Versus letting him think a guy named Sanford owns it and he's in a desk somewhere, which is what I would think if I saw a name on a truck. I'd assume there's a guy named Sanford sitting in an office somewhere making sure his guys are going out on time.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you'd like to tell this story of like striving entrepreneur, good story, all that stuff. But people will see you as like, oh, he acquired the business. He's an investor,
He's not a plumber. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So there was a little bit of friction there. I feel like even though we are more, to Lauren's question, even though we may look more polished and certainly a more deliberate brand aesthetic, it's my brand now. And it also like it speaks to my background and like what I believe in and tells the customer a little bit about what we stand for and what they can expect from us. Like for instance, the radio spots that went live on the radio yesterday, they're spoken by me. So like they are me on the radio talking about what's valuable to us and what we care about and what our values are. So I think you bring up a good point, Lauren, but I think the fact that we changed the name to something that reflects our values and reflects a little bit of my background and philosophy, I think negates that.
If not negates it, it certainly counteracts it. There will certainly be some people that will want to deal with Mr. Sanford, but to your point, you got a good story to tell now, so I think it will more than make up for it.
And I think this is the real, like what Lauren just brought up is like, this is the real reason why taking the Sanford name and putting it across all three branches just in a big, kind of like a Big Brother takeover would have been the wrong move, because we would not have gained the ability to like lean into the brand and the brand story. I mean, basically, like what really would differentiate us from private equity other than we just have less cash, So I think that would have been a big mistake. And I think we would have looked like private equity entering the market, and it would have been difficult for us to convince people otherwise.
So what you're saying, I think, if I hear you right, is the difference between that, putting Sanford on all the locations versus what you did is really a matter of authenticity. It's your story. So you're rebranding everywhere. It is different, but it's a real story. Does that make sense to you, Shawn?
Yeah. So I think it's a great move. And honestly, I'd say lean in even harder, man. Like in coming years, as there's more and more awareness of what private equity does to price, experience, quality, I think customers are going to start to look more for brands that actually say, no, we are not owned by private equity.
Rich, what are we going to talk about when you come back next year?
Oh, man. Well, hopefully we're not talking about how I blew up my company and brand.
I don't think so.
I have to tell you, your whole process, really impressive. Good for you. Great instincts. Everything makes perfect sense. Really, hats off to you.
I appreciate that. I do.
All right. My thanks to Shawn Busse, Jay Goltz, and Rich Jordan. Thanks for sharing, all of you. I do appreciate it. One thing before you go. Everything we do at 21 Hats is created by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs to help us all learn together. If you get something out of listening to these podcast episodes, consider joining the conversation. You can do that by joining the 21 Hats Sounding Board, a Slack channel where you can tap the wisdom of a very smart crowd, or by becoming a founding member and joining our monthly Zoom forum, where you can be part of conversations much like the ones we have on the podcast. You can sign up for both by subscribing to the Morning Report. If you have any questions, you can email me at lauren@21hats.com. And if you get something out of this podcast or out of the Morning Report, please tell a friend, tell an enemy, tell every business owner you know. Your word of mouth, owner to owner, will always be the most effective way to build this community for all of us. Thank you. It means a lot. This episode was produced by another entrepreneur, Jess Stuberon, founder of Blank Word Productions. Thanks for listening, everyone.